What's going on, guys? Smoking a Garcia Vega in this video. How did the war on drugs actually start? Where did the inception actually occur? I'll tell you where it started. It all started with a man named Ronald Reagan. Prior to the 1980s, Ronald Reagan was a well-known racist man. He was just flat out racist, which is why people say Donald Trump was the closest thing to him. And many people who were actually Reagan fans actually say that Donald Trump was a way better president than Ronald Reagan. But anyways, there's actual recording of Ronald Reagan talking to Richard Nixon, talking about black people, calling us monkeys, and basically just using derogatory terms to basically describe black people. Even in his speeches, he was a great politician. He understood how to use racist language, but to code it and to essentially go to that dog whistling style of campaigning and giving speeches the same way Trump did. So all this is prior to the 80s actually starting. Once Reagan is the president in the 1980s, he basically has the same sentiment that Richard Nixon does, that black people are the ones who mainly smoke cannabis, on top of progressive white hippies who agree with them on basically everything. And this is the elements and the culmination of the new left in America. This solidarity of confluence amongst African Americans and amongst progressive white people coming together, which Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan both saw as a very dangerous thing. So they both said that we have to do something about this. Richard Nixon actually made cannabis a Schedule I drug, putting it up there with heroin, crack, basically all the other illicit drugs. Richard Nixon laid the groundworks for what Ronald Reagan did in the 1980s. Once Ronald Reagan comes along and he's the president, he understands that he wants to do population control. Like I said, he has the same sentiment as Richard Nixon. And he understands the only way to sufficiently defeat these people is if they're behind bars and they can't even have the same rights as everyone else, which is the right to vote. So Ronald Reagan gins up a great strategic plan in terms of a white nationalistic sense, in terms of the military-industrial complex and the deep state also working in unison and confluence with one another to produce this outcome. Ronald Reagan decides he wants to sell arms to Iran. Now, Ronald Reagan, he led the nation on to believe that these arms were being sold to Iran in exchange for the hostages that were coming from Iran, which is just completely untrue. It's just not true. That's not what his intentions were at all in any way, shape, or form with this whole entire ordeal and transaction. But the United States does this because there's elements and articles within our Constitution stating that the United States can't just purchase anything that's out the ordinary in terms of business as usual, basically. So what am I really saying? Basically, the funds of our country can't be used for anything else than what is basically authorized for proper purchase by the Congress, or if it's just not part of business as usual in terms of the deep state with our country. So what does Ronald Reagan do? He finds a loophole. He creates a way to make this happen, to actually do this. This is why he sells the weapons to Iran, by the way, who we're still fierce enemies with to this very day. I wonder why. Probably because of the CIA weapons and military industrial complex weapons we gave to them. But anyways, he does that. Like I said, this was his loophole. This was his way to actually do this, to make his vision come to fruition. So this is how we gin up the funds, sustain a civil war that's going on and happening in Nicaragua that we have actually no interest in. Our only interest is to bring the military-industrial complex in the loop while also bringing over cocaine to the United States. And all this is factual evidence. All this is verified by CIA. So there's a civil war happening in Nicaragua, guerrilla warfare essentially. And Ronald Reagan says, well, we're gonna hop in this. Our interest is best in this too. From the funds that we use to sell Iran the weapons, we use those funds to prop up and propel the guerrilla warfare that's happening in Nicaragua, to fund the Contras merely to sustain the duration of this war. We have no actual interest in this. Our only interest is getting what's on their soil, which is the poppy flower used to create cocaine and crack. That's our only interest. This is why we're there. This is why we're propping them up. This is why we're giving them weapons. This is why we're funding them, so this war can sustain in terms of duration in order to accomplish what Ronald Reagan wants. And that's ultimately population control. So every time the Contras got shipments or any type of cargo from the United States, as we're unloading cargo and giving them whatever resources that they need to sustain this war, while we're unloading the weapons and artillery, everything that they need, we're also putting on what's used to create crack and cocaine here in the United States. We're loading them back up onto our cargo planes to bring back to the United States. That's the distribution side of this whole entire equation. That's just the distribution side. So this is how it's getting to America. Now, once it's in America, the United States partners with plugs and trappers all across America. We partner with them in exchange for our partnership. This is basically a way of them being able to get their product while also paying the government, them making a profit off of this, getting the product, bringing it into the country, and then selling it for themselves, obviously, to make an income and a living for themselves. One of the prime beneficiaries of this whole entire ordeal and system is Freeway Ricky Ross. He's a real person. He's from East Texas. He went to California during the 80s, during this time, in order to make a better life for himself and to also become a part of the drug game. And he's on the record expressing all this, telling all of this. This is all out there on the internet, all out there on YouTube. He's been said this. There's been many CIA agents to back him up and to also correlate and confluence with what he's saying. And he talks about all the drop pickups that he basically made with CIA agents and members of our government. He talks about that openly. And it wasn't just him, it was people all across America. But anyways, they do this for a certain period of time, for a long time. And for a long time, they're successful people, successful trappers, successful plugs. Then Ronald Reagan signs a 1984 crime bill, making it an extreme offense to even be in possession of many of these same drugs that the United States is bringing into the country. This is where the Just Say No campaign comes into full effect. His wife is going all across Los Angeles, all across the country, going on tours with police departments as they raid people's homes. A lot of times they'll be raiding the wrong homes, destroying people's lives and destroying their houses, but they lock up all the people that they have just done business with, duping them into doing business with the United States government, thinking that they're protected fully always. They lock these same people up and they know who they are because they've been doing business with them. This is why I say this was his main goal out of this whole entire thing, because during that time period and then going into the 90s, because he laid the groundwork for all of this, and then Bill Clinton basically put the icing on the cake when he signed his crime bill in the 90s. This is how you start to have even more generations of black homes without fathers because of the bills that these people put forward. The same way that they were doing business with them, they end up effing them in the end because they had bills and legislation that could lock them up easily for long durations of time, making it population control, having more black people in prisons than some countries have in terms of a population. That's a problem. But there were investigations into all of this, and Ronald Reagan, he addresses the country, and he basically lies to the whole entire country. He admits what he has just done, while at the same time acting like he doesn't know what he has just done. This is why I say Ronald Reagan is the greatest bullshitter probably in American history. He was able to dupe millions of people to believe that he was just this elderly figure that seriously wanted to help out America in a fiscally responsible manner and way. And this is where the term trickle-down economics comes from. It comes from Ronald Reagan because he created it literally thinking that it would do good, cutting the taxes for major multi-million-dollar conglomerate corporations all across America, not merely cutting their taxes, but cutting the taxes of obviously the wealthiest people in our country. And he believed that this would produce massive amounts of wealth to our country, that it will trickle down to the bottom and people at the bottom of the spectrum will start to see the crumbs fall to them. This whole entire notion and theory was debunked, obviously, because this is how you get Bill Clinton in the 90s. So Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan, both of them combined, laid the groundworks for what we know today to be population control, because if all these black people don't go to jail, we might see the difference in terms of outcomes with many presidential elections. Many. Do me a big favor. Don't forget to hit that notification bell, like, subscribe, comment, and share. Peace.